Ruin My Childhood.
Thank you for listening to Ruin My Childhood, the podcast where we decide if some things are better left in the past. I'm Kat.
I'm Mike.
And what are we discussing today, Michael?
We're going to be discussing the 1997 classic starring Robin Williams, Flubber.
I don't know if I'd consider Flubber a classic, but...
No, you know what? I probably wouldn't either.
We'll see how it goes.
It's a movie that existed when we were children.
What do you remember about this film?
You know, this one, even though it's Robin Williams, is probably the Robin Williams movie meant for kids that I watched the least. But somehow I saw it in theaters twice because I remember going with my family and then I remember going to see it again with my cousins. But I don't think I ever saw it again. Maybe once or twice when it was on like Wonderful World of Disney or something like that. But I don't really remember too much about it. I think it's Jean Triplehorn's in the movie. I remember the dancing sequence where Flubber like multiplies and is dancing around. And then I just remember there's like a subplot around helping the basketball team win. But I just, from what I remember, it's just, you know, Robin Williams-ing about.
Definitely remember Robin Williams, some kind of sentient green goo.
Yep.
And a lot of slapstick. But, you know, I think I thought that this was a movie more geared towards younger kids. So even though I wasn't that old when it came out, I kind of felt like I was too old for it.
You would have been like 9 and I was going on 9.
Which is weird because like I'm smack dab in the middle of the demographic they were probably aiming for. But
probably.
Maybe I was a refined 9-year-old.
You were always kind of a snob.
I was kind of a snob. I still, you know, I think I appreciate slapstick more now, but as a kid, definitely not.
At 9 years old, she was reading War and Peace.
Actually, I probably read that when I was younger. All right.
What do you remember about it? Anything specific or just the dancing, the green sentient goo?
Yeah, that's pretty much it.
That's pretty much all I remember.
Yeah, there wasn't a lot. My friend Lauren's aunt was his hairstylist.
Shout out to Lauren's aunt.
Yeah, and they filmed it in San Francisco or the Bay Area. So
because Robin Williams liked filming there.
Yeah, so I think like as a kid that was kind of a cool novelty, actually. Sort of knowing someone who worked on a film because that wasn't part of our world growing up being in Northern California. But I know that Robin Williams really liked working close to home whenever possible. So
yeah.
It's kind of fun when these San Francisco or Bay Area based films pop up.
Yeah. And now knowing somebody who's worked on a film set's not a big deal to you at all.
No.
That's just your day to day.
It's my day to day.
Nice.
The grind. I guess we should go watch this thing.
Yeah, let's do it.
Oops. After a lifetime of failures,
what a bang!
Professor Philip Brainerd finally invented something that works.
Yeah!
Unfortunately, it's Flubber on November 26th.
Get him!
It's not just a glob.
Oh, boy.
It's an adventure.
Hit the deck!
Robin Williams.
It's Flubber!
Flubber, the absent-minded professor. Rated PG. Starts Wednesday, November 26th.
All right. We are back. It was an experience.
It was an experience.
I don't know how I feel about all this.
I'm glad that it was on Disney Plus and we didn't have to pay to rent it.
Oh, God.
Let's just leave it. Let's start there and we'll build towards it. But I think people are going to be able to figure out where we're headed on this one.
Oof. Yeah. All right. Directed by Les Mayfield. He directed Blue Streak, Encino Man, Miracle on 34th Street. So, you know, keeping in the remake vein.
Yep.
It was written by John Hughes.
Did not seem like a John Hughes film.
No, it did not. I don't know what happened. Credit was given to Bill Walsh, who was, of course, the original creator, I guess, of The Absent-Minded Professor, which this film was basically a remake of.
Essentially.
And Samuel W. Taylor, who wrote the short story A Situation of Gravity.
Ooh, that sounds deep.
It does. Is that children's literature?
I don't know, but yeah, they got credit for it.
I don't know. I know there was The Absent-Minded Professor, and then there was like a sequel to The Absent-Minded Professor that was specifically about Flubber.
Yeah, I think so.
So like the green goo character predates the film title.
Yes.
The budget was $80 million. It made $177 million at the box office. And it has a Rotten Tomatoes critic score of 24% and an audience score of 33%. It was released November 30th, 1997.
I'll go in a little bit about the production. In my research, there wasn't a ton about it. It kind of makes sense. This isn't a very
good,
warm regarded movie, so there's not a lot of people going back and looking at it. But this started production in 1996 with director Les Mayfield, who you already mentioned, has actually done another remake already, Miracle on 34th Street, which was also a John Hughes film. So John Hughes decided to work with him again. You also mentioned that this primarily took place in the San Francisco Bay Area, but they actually filmed in a bunch of schools in the area. So they filmed it in an all-girls high school, probably Notre Dame or Presentation would be my guess.
I know that they filmed on Treasure Island quite a bit in the same stages that those were my stomping grounds when I was starting out.
They did. So they actually went and filmed at Stanford, University of the Pacific in Stockton, San Jose State. And then they also created duplicates of those places on Treasure Island. But they actually used Stanford and the high school for both.
All the pretty schools.
The residential and office settings. And then
Nice.
they duplicated those on Treasure Island. For the most part, most of the people signed on after Robin Williams was attached, and one of the kind of the people who spoke out about this was Christopher McDonald, who played a lot of like the villain roles in the 90s. He was in Happy Gilmore and Thelma and Louise, and he actually turned this down because he felt it was too similar to those roles. But then when Robin Williams signed on, he reached back out to Disney and said he would do it because he'd always wanted to work with Robin Williams, and he would play any role to get that opportunity. So
I mean, that's the move, though. Like,
Right.
if you can work with Robin Williams, you'll play anything.
I would.
Absolutely, 100%. Oh man, this the reception and legacy of this film. It opened alongside Alien Resurrection and was projected to gross about $32.5 million on its 5-day Thanksgiving opening weekend. They set it up for so much success. It underperformed with $26.7 million opening, but still was number one at the box office. It remained in the top spot the following weekend, but with a huge 58% drop in attendance that weekend. The weekend when word of mouth gets out. The film opened to generally negative reviews, but was noted to have fantastic visual effects, but those were outshined by tiresome and weak slapstick humor. This movie was generally seen as a failure and a waste of talent on and behind the screen, despite being a profitable film. That's fair. I think that's generous, honestly. Like, what were they thinking?
No. So, I'll summarize it really quick and then we can get into it. So, essentially, you've got Robin Williams is playing Phil. I don't even know his last name. I don't care. We're always just going to say Robin Williams for the rest of this episode. But he plays a professor who's very absent-minded. But he doesn't really come across absent-minded. He kind of comes across as, I would say, on the spectrum. Like, he really does not seem to be able to function as an adult at all.
No.
So he has all these, like, seemingly sentient robots, as well as a flying robot assistant named Weebo. And it's not Marcia Gay. It was Marcia Gay Harden, not Jean Triplehorn, who was in this movie. But he's engaged to Sarah, played by Marcia Gay Harden.
I feel like Marcia Gay Harden is just like Jean Triplehorn's Raichu.
Yeah, I never can tell the difference between the two of them. It's terrible. But Robin Williams' character has already missed 2 of his weddings because he just forgot to go because he was working on some sort of experiment. So this is his last chance to get married, and he blows it because he invents Flubber, flying rubber, which is also a sentient thing that's supposed to be, I don't understand how this works, but it's supposed to be
horrible.
A new energy source, but it also defies physics and can bounce and everything, but it's alive. And because he misses the wedding, you've got Shooter McGavin, Christopher McDonald. I don't actually know what this character's name is. I think it was like Wilson something or other. Is his like scientific rival, used to be his scientific partner, but like stole a bunch of his secrets and made a bunch of profit off of it. And he comes back into town and says, I'm going to steal your fiance and marry her. So Robin Williams decides he needs to create Flubber as an energy source to save not only his fiance and his relationship, but also to save the school, because apparently the school like has a giant loan that's due in like 30 days. And if they don't pay it, the school's going to get shut down.
How does this happen?
It doesn't make sense that a university that is either Stanford, Presentation, Notre Dame, or San Jose State was going to fold in a 30-day period.
Although, like, some universities did find themselves in similar situations over the pandemic.
Yeah, but
without
not like
attendance.
a 30-day.
Not
like,
an institution, as it's presented to be.
It doesn't make sense. But yeah, that's basically the plot. He uses Flubber to save the day. He also cheats at NCAA basketball. He's a criminal.
This guy, like, I have a lot of questions. Like, okay, so when we first meet him, it's his house, and all of his appliances are seemingly sentient and fighting with one another and cleaning the house, preparing his breakfast, but it's all, like, very automated. So does he get up and eat the same thing every day?
I would imagine he does. A lot of geniuses have the same thing every day and wear the same thing every day, so that way they don't have to make all these decisions and be distracted by.
And the whole house is disgusting. Like,
Yep.
it looks like that's the house he grew up in, and he just never left. And his
I would imagine that's the case.
parents died off and left him to do what he will. It's just kind of like, did this guy start off as an extreme ADHD case that, like, developed into dementia in his later years? Because
Oh,
it doesn't
don't say
make
that. That's what he actually.
I know, that's why this film is so dark now, because the character seems like someone with advanced dementia.
Yeah, it's very odd. And none of this is very original. Like, his house is essentially Doc Brown's house from Back to the Future.
Right.
There's
But I
nothing
haven't
unique about it.
seen The Absent-Minded Professor or its sequel.
I haven't either. This is something I'll probably end up, unfortunately, having to watch again. I'm saying, unfortunately, I have to watch this again. Like, people don't even need to listen to this episode anymore because it's very clear where we're going with it.
Right.
But I'll probably watch this at some point for Remake Rewind.
There are some, like, gems of scenes just because they're so over the top, bizarre, and stupid that they're funny.
Yeah, and I do want to say at the top, I mean, obviously, when we talked about the critics said about this, the special effects are pretty incredible, not just for
They're
1997,
amazing.
but they still, I would say these would have still held up as state-of-the-art even in the mid to late 2000s.
It still looks a lot better than a lot of children's films that are coming out today.
There's a few scenes with, like, Weibo flying around where it's, like, imperceptible that it's not part of reality, but then there are a few times where Robin Williams interacts with touching a button or something, and you can tell that it's not physically there. But Weibo, for the most part, if you told me they had it on some sort of gimbal or wire work and they just green screen that, I would believe you, because Weibo looks fantastic.
Yeah, it looks absolutely seamless through most of the film.
Even Flubber looks pretty solid most of the movie. Like, despite the physics doesn't make sense.
Weibo actually ends up being a bigger character than Robin Williams' girlfriend or anyone else in the film, really. Well, his fiance, but I mean...
No, it's weird, and I completely forgot about the subplot. I'm quite honest, I forgot about Weibo. I didn't remember Weibo at all. But once Weibo popped up, I was like, oh yeah, I remember her, voiced by the actress who voices Ariel in The Little Mermaid.
Weibo's kind of fun, though, because she's, like, ahead of her time.
She's definitely ahead of her time.
She's got this little screen that pops up out of the top, and she just, like, flashes, and not even, like, modern memes, like the originators of memes, when we used to just send each other, like, random gifs of bizarre stuff.
Yeah.
It's like that. She's all memes all the time.
She's just doing memes, and...
she's very much like something that would have emerged out of 2022.
Yeah, absolutely. And what's crazy about it is once again I forgot about the fact that she even existed, but she's also in love with him and actively is sabotaging his relationship with Sarah until, the middle to end of the movie. It's just insane. Like, how do you forget about that? And one of the things that drove me crazy about it, and then it, like, was a throwaway line towards the last 10-15 minutes of the movie, I was like, he needs money to save the school. And throughout the movie, people are trying to buy Flubber. And he's like, well, if I'm going to sell it, it's going to be to help the school. It's actually the property of the school because I work for the school. He's all on board with having his inventions go to the school for profit so that way it can be maintained. And the whole time I'm like, that is not just an AI. That is an advanced sentient AI that he's created. He would be a billionaire, if not trillionaire, for that. And I'm like, how is he not selling that? And then at the end of the movie, there's just a throwaway line that he made it by accident and he was never able to replicate, and that's why it couldn't be sold. And I'm like, that's such a cop-out. Like, that just doesn't make any sense. Let alone all of his other robots that he definitely put some AI into it. Maybe not sentience, but definitely AI. That he would be a billionaire for that.
Absolutely.
So it makes no sense. Like that, he had like his vacuum, his toaster oven. He had other things going around cleaning. Like, he would be a trillionaire.
He also, like, granted, he had the like the warning signs that you need legally for the fire department on the front of your building when you have certain chemicals in it. Like, he had a couple of those signs on his house, but I don't think that he would have been able to get the clearance to be able to have radioactive material in his basement.
Yeah, he had plutonium
of his house. He had plutonium.
He had his little radioactive suit, his lined suit and everything, but it was just in a normal basement, like, that's not lined with anything. Like, that radiation would be, like, leaching into the home and everywhere around. Like, that is not safe.
But he also would have broken, like, several international laws regarding genetic experimentation because he, like, takes a bit of his hair, which I guess we're supposed to believe that somehow, like, the DNA that's available in a hair could make any difference in this concoction, but he, like, adds it to his radioactive
Flubber.
It's a radioactive polymer with a piece of his hair in it, basically.
Yeah. Well, and what doesn't make sense, the whole crux of he's trying to create a new energy source for flight, travel, everything. And I don't understand how making a polymer that's elastic and stretchy would ever do that, but okay, for whatever reason it works. But to make it work, he ends up modifying a classic T-Bird car to fly with it, and he puts like a little engine, and as he turns the steering wheel, the little engine, and it just looks like this big old lead orb in the middle of the car can do it. But he has to use gamma radiation to excite the flubber molecules to move the vehicle, and it's like, but you can't just get gamma rays, and like, how was he doing that? That seems like more expensive than just using gasoline. Now, granted, I guess flubber never goes away, so it's a perpetual energy source, but you still need to get the gamma rays to excite it. So does that mean we have to make every car on the planet have some sort of plutonium or something in it?
Right. But it also feels like the properties of flubber aren't any reduced by the reduction of flubber. So, like, he makes flubber into a powder at one point, and he adds a tiny bit of the powder to a jar of hand cream. And it seems like there has been zero reduction in the properties of flubber just from putting his hand cream on it. Then he makes it into a spray and puts that spray on a bunch of stuff. But then, like, he's also, like, wiping his hands on things. And the flubber never seems to degrade, but also it's radioactive, so of course it doesn't degrade. But he's, like, leaving it all over this educational institution.
Thing drives me crazy because, I'm going to jump ahead just a bit for a minute. I mentioned that there's like a crux of the stories revolves around like a basketball team, and he cheats to win. And what drives me crazy is, like, he gets it on their hands, he gets it on their shoes so they can jump and everything. And we'll go through some of the scenes and I'll say why it's ridiculous. But it's ridiculous because no way those players who had zero athletic ability would have been able to control this new physical feats that they would have had without knowing about it. But to your point, like, he's able to pass it along. Like, there's a point where he accidentally pats his butt, and then later on it saves him because somebody, like, throws something at him and he, like, hip checks it and it goes flying. But when he puts it on the ball, he puts it on their shoes, but the other team somehow doesn't get the benefit of flubber on the ball or on the basketball court, but these guys are getting it on their hands and they're able to, like, dribble the ball like 1,000,000 miles per hour. It doesn't make any sense that it doesn't come off. Like, he completely saturates the ball, and it doesn't, like, the referee doesn't notice it. Like, every time you score or halftime, whatever, it changes. Like, basketball is quarters. So between quarters, the ref would have had the ball, and as soon as he would have tossed it, it would have went all over the place. So it's, like, very inconsistent. Yeah,
the rules change all the time. And it seems like when flubber of its own accord in the beginning starts flying around, okay, first of all, he tests it in his own lab.
Oh my God.
Destroys his basement lab.
Multiple times.
He, like, decides to amp it up by putting it on a freaking bowling ball. Like, why is that the choice that you make? Anyway, he has, like, this glob of flubber in the beginning, and it breaks up into all these little flubber globs, and those globs are also sentient. So, like, is every little speck and particle of the flubber sentient? That makes me deeply uncomfortable.
Well, I'm glad you brought up the fact that flubber is sentient again, because that dancing scene, one is, like, a male flubber dancing around, and then another one pops up in a like a skirt. It seems like it's probably like a hive mind kind of situation.
It's God.
But they definitely, each individual one can do a thing. But what drives me crazy about it is it makes the rest of it problematic. Is he did create a sentient life form, synthetic life form, but he created a synthetic sentient life form.
The UN would not be okay with this.
No, and he uses it for fuel. That'd be like if we went and got little children and ground them up and used them as fuel. And that's essentially what he's doing. Like even like he takes a little bit of flubber, takes a piece of sentient life, turns it into dehydrates it, turns it into the powder, like you said, or turns it into the spray. He's using a sentient creature to coat things, and it makes no sense. And speaking of the sentience, it drives me crazy when we first discover it. Robin Williams goes, like the shave on a haircut, goes, da 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 da, and then Flubber goes, da da. Like, how would it know that?
Know? So it's all knowing. Okay, so Flubber is God. It has to
Quite
be.
possibly a benevolent God. Yeah.
It's horrifying.
There's another thing. There was like another song or something. Let me just go through my notes.
And where did he get radioactive isotope? Like it would have had to have been purchased on the dark web. But was the dark web a thing in 1997?
Oh, it was. I mean, he probably just knew the Libyans for that Doc Brown went to.
Oh, jeez. The Libyans.
Right, there's a point where like it morphs into Godzilla. Now that kind of makes sense a little bit because it's watching TV. Okay, I would do that. But during that scene where you mentioned it goes through like a screen window and it gets split into like thousands of little flubbers. Mm-hmm. One little drop falls on an ink vial and then it starts bouncing around and it draws the Mona Lisa in pen ink. How would it know what the Mona Lisa is?
It's all knowing.
It doesn't make any sense.
The more we examine this film, the more uncomfortable I get.
It falls apart very quickly.
It does. So there really aren't any rules. Unfortunately, like the plot, the school thing is just so unbelievable. One, how did they get themselves into that situation? Two, why is it his responsibility to fix it? Three, why don't they do a fundraiser? Also, his fiance, she works at the school, right? She's the president of the school. She's the president of the school. She's a doctor, whatever. She has her doctorate. Why does she want anything to do with him?
It's also inappropriate.
It's extremely inappropriate. And on top of that, the only like real villain in the entire film is just some guy who's trying to get with his fiance who has stood up at the altar on multiple occasions. So that immediately makes him like a non-villain. He's kind of the better guy in this scenario.
Yeah, but he did steal Robin Williams' intellectual property, and he's just kind of like, well, if I didn't steal it and make my millions off of it, you would have forgot about it or not finished it. And it's just like, well, then why not be a good friend and a business partner? Like, you run the business aspect, let him be the scientist, whatever. But there's actually another villain. Will Wheaton is in this movie, and he is it's so weird because he's set up to be like a little villain, but his father's the real villain of the end of the movie. But like Will Wheaton, his character doesn't make any sense because he's this like spoiled rich kid and he's supposed to get all A's because the daddy is paying all the people off, but Robin Williams doesn't give him an A because he doesn't live in the real world, whatever. But Will Wheaton really doesn't seem to care about the school. But then at the basketball game at the end, the evil father bets against the school, and Will Wheaton's like, "Hey, this is my team. I just can't play because I got a D in Robin Williams' class." But he like seems to really actually care about the team, and it just doesn't seem in character for him.
Right.
But yeah, then there's the father who like has his goons. He's got Ted Levine, who is Buffalo Bill in Silence of the Lambs, and then Clancy Brown, who's classic voice actor and also in Highlander and plays a lot of these like goon roles. Break into Robin Williams' house and like steal Flubber, and they're gonna use it. But the whole plot around the money thing doesn't make sense because at the end of the movie, Robin Williams goes, "I will sell you Flubber if you give us a 30-day extension on the loan." The whole thing with this kid is he needs straight A's so he can get into Harvard Business School, and the dad's paying it off. Wouldn't it be in his best interest to keep the school open so his son could actually graduate, get the degree, and go to Harvard? If he closes the school, all the money you spent to get his son A's goes away. And also, why would you send your kid to a school that's about to lose accreditation and shut down? Like, surely you could have paid to get the kid in Stanford.
It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, there's not one aspect of this plot that makes sense.
Is it actually supposed to be set in the Bay Area?
It is supposed to be set in the Bay Area because, you see, I mean, I can't imagine how it's not. You see the Bay as they're flying around.
Oh, man. Send the guy to a state school.
Yeah, it's just so weird that, it's probably just some other fictional private university, but still, either way, like, why would you do that. And then it's just like the physics of this movie. You know, you have to suspend your disbelief a little bit.
Obviously.
Right. But the physics of Flubber doesn't make any sense, how it can just go through walls and everything, but Robin Williams catches it with the baseball glove and
It can
wrestles
just
it in.
fly if it wants to. Because you think, okay, well, maybe this works because with the introduction of impact, the vibration could accelerate internally somehow, whatever, and that's how it works.
Right.
But the flying,
That doesn't
there's
make any
no way
sense.
to explain it.
No. But
Although with the flying, we do have a fun little subplot that runs throughout the film.
oh,
I actually don't know who this little kid is.
the little kid actually played Robin Williams, a young Robin Williams in What Dreams May Come, but I don't know what the actor's
Aw,
name is.
Cute. But towards the beginning of the film, when Flubber's just getting amped up, we're introduced to this father tucking his son in for bed. He's like, nothing is gonna come in your window. Like nothing can get up this high. He's just trying to reassure him. And then Flubber flies on in, traumatizes this poor kid. Like that single experience of like Flubber flying in your window and
Destroying your bedroom.
destroying your bedroom after you've been reassured is enough to make no kid ever want to sleep in their own bed again. But then Flubber ends up going back to this kid several times throughout the film. Every single time when he's being reassured that he's okay and nothing's gonna happen.
And then it
to him.
ends, like the ending of the movie is they're flying in the car, which this
They're
makes no
flying
sense.
in the car.
30,000 feet in the air. Like they're at cruising altitude with this plane.
How are they breathing?
How are they breathing? And we've got, we'll get back into it, but we've got Weebo's daughter, because Weebo got killed. That's weird. And Flubber like flies out of the car, goes onto the window, scares the crap out of the kid again, and then it's just like,
Because he just happens to be in that jet.
yeah, the end. It's like this kid is destroyed for life. This kid's gonna need so much therapy. It's not even funny.
He can't live in the real world with anything like mint jelly or gag.
No, well, and so like one of the things I also wanted to talk about was how this universe is like somehow death has gotta not be a part of this universe, because like the stuff that the goons go through in this are far worse than anything that like the wet bandits went through
They get
in Home
smacked
Alone.
in the head with a flubberfied bowling ball
And golf ball.
and are
That would
completely fine.
caved in their skulls, like vaporized them, and they just have little golf ball sized welts on their head.
Yeah.
Like that would have destroyed
They're
them.
like on par with the Home Alone goons.
Shooter McGavin would have had his guts destroyed.
Shooter McGavin.
Because towards the finale of the film, Flubber goes flying and it goes into the back of him. Instead of flying through the back of his skull or bouncing back out, it goes down and you see his stomach like moving around and he's like, ooh, ah, ooh, ah, ooh, ah, ooh, ah, ooh, mommy. And then it shoots out his butt.
So I was looking for information about this film while we were getting ready for this. And there's really not a lot of information about it or the production online. I think almost everyone just kind of wanted to like wash their hands of this film and move on with their lives, and they're all a little bit embarrassed. So all that's on YouTube is random scenes that are cut out. Naturally, that is the only one that I clicked on. But it's looped, so it just keeps getting better the more you watch it, because it
So it's
shoots
like it's shooting out his butt and then in his mouth.
because it shoots out like through his pants, leaves a hole behind, and then just pops straight back into his mouth at the beginning of that scene.
It's so funny.
It's worth watch.
The
Weebo is terrifying.
yeah, she's pretty rapey.
She's super rapey for a robot. She even kind of like goes so far as to make a holographic projection of herself so that she can have like a physical body. And that's disturbing and terrifying. And she's just like walking around his house, like playing house while he's asleep.
Yeah. Well, the couple times while he's asleep, she like walks up and like she can't actually stroke him because it's a projection, but she like runs her hand not across his face and everything. It's super weird. She sabotages him. Like
She cancels his wedding dates.
Yeah, she like deletes his wedding stuff from the calendar and everything, and it's just, and he even starts to remember. He goes, "There's something with white, something with white, something with white. What do I have to do today that has something to do with white?" And she knows, and she just chooses not to tell him.
Right.
Like she's not a good companion.
It's terrifying. Like, how did she get that way? What happened? How did she gain sentience?
Right. Well, and he says it was like a glorious accident. But my whole thing is like when she gets killed, like when the bad guys come,
It's kind of gruesome.
Yeah, they hit her with the baseball bat. She's leaking battery acid, and he's just like, "Oh, I'm trying to find an extension cord, try to find a way to charge her, and then I can back her up." What? You've already
you
now
want
at this
to?
point, after he finds her dead and dying, like they have a little like, "Oh, you're so bad," and she's like, oh, I'm so sorry. And she has a little moment with Sarah beforehand, like before she dies, she finds a way to get to Sarah and say, hey, Sarah, I sabotaged Robin Williams. It's my fault he didn't make it to your wedding. Like, come and help him. So they get back, and we find out at this point, like the whole time we were watching the movie, we're like, why hasn't he sold this? Why hasn't he duplicated this? And Sarah goes, well, why don't you just make her again or back her up? And he's like, oh, I can't. And she's dying and I didn't make a backup. You never figured out how to make this.
Right.
And you have the capability of doing a backup. Why did you never back her up before? That just seems like you're an idiot if you don't back up your laptop. But if you forget to back up the world's only sentient AI,
right,
who also has access to the internet and making memes beforehand, like how do you not have that saved onto a server somewhere?
Well, she found a way to make a better version of herself.
Yep.
That subsequently she refers to as her daughter, I guess.
Yep. Skynet.
In a weird way. Yeah. So she like replicates herself, but because she's self-aware and sentient, she also recognizes her own flaws. So she makes sure that her daughter doesn't have her flaws in her programming.
That's dangerous.
It is dangerous. It's terrifying.
None of this makes sense.
These robots could take over the entire world.
Yeah. And at this point, like, he needs to go, okay, well, we definitely can make changes. We need to figure this out, but he doesn't. The more I think about it, this just occurred to me, and it's driving me crazy now. So there's a point where him and Sarah spray their hands with Flubber so they can fight the bad guys.
He sprays it onto his butt so an ashtray that was thrown at him can bounce off.
So I have an issue with this because the whole point is that he says at some point, like, oh, it absorbs the kinetic energy, like you said. So
how'd you even pour it into a container?
Right. That doesn't make any sense. But he explains that, like, every time it makes physical contact, it absorbs all the kinetic energy so it can keep going. So if I have it on my fist and I punch you, wouldn't the Flubber on my hand absorb all the energy and just throw my hand back? Like,
yeah.
Because it doesn't damage the walls. The only thing it ever seems to really break is glass and porcelain. So that doesn't make any sense. And, like, there's also, like, the physics, other things that don't make sense that he should know. So, like, when he decides he's going to cheat at the basketball game, he wants to test it, and he's getting this stuff all over the stadium and the basketball court. But he wants to put on his shoes and figure out if he can control bouncing. He never actually does, but he's like, oh, I'm going to need a counterweight. So he, like, takes a 50-pound bag of, like, cement or whatever and ties a bungee cord to it. And he's like, okay, perfect. I've got a 50-pound counterweight to it. He weighs... Robin Williams conservatively probably weighed 200 pounds plus.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he's not the most in shape guy. So
he was stocky.
Yeah, so I'd say he's at least 200 pounds. How is a 50-pound weight going to be a counterbalance for you? And that kind of thing. And a thing where every time you make contact, you get stronger and faster. And eventually, it doesn't work, but it worked a lot longer than it should have.
But then he decides to pivot and experiment on children instead. Without their consent.
Well, no, these are college students. It's still unethical.
You're still a child if you're like under 20.
Yeah, but it doesn't make sense because he's like, oh, proof of concept, even though he never gains control of it. Like, he's bouncing around, and then he grabs onto the basketball hoop and then gets slung-shot back, and then the cement comes to fly to him. He's like, it worked. No, it didn't. You never got to the point where you controlled it, and you just let these children, as you put it, use this with no explanation as to what's going on.
Right.
They would have all died.
Like, what if their necks?
They break their necks. And then it makes no sense because, like, various people, including both villains, are like, this doesn't make any sense. They're clearly cheating. They got destroyed the first half of the game, and now they're doing all this stuff. And the ref's like, there's no rule about jumping too high. And it's like, clearly there's some performance enhancing going on. And then...
Why is the entire crowd not running in terror?
You're right. Why is there a crowd there at all when this team is supposed to be the worst team at all? Like, why would this game be sold out?
Especially because, like, even now in modern society, if we were to witness something like that happening, your brain kind of goes through the list of scenarios to make it make sense, and it would have eventually landed on demons, and everyone would have run because nothing else makes sense.
And then what also doesn't make sense is, so afterward, like, they make a bet. The whole reason he decides to do the basketball thing is he is in the flying car hovering over Sarah's house, being a stalker.
Creepy.
And he overhears Shooter McGavin and Sarah going, oh, let's have a bet. If my team wins, Shooter McGavin says, if my team wins, you have to go with me on a ski vacation this weekend. If your team wins, you buy me dinner. So he's getting something out of it regardless.
That's so creepy, though, as well. Like,
yeah,
she's being coerced.
Yeah, he's not a good dude. But Robin Williams hears that and goes, well, I have to make sure the team wins so I can, one, have a practical application of Flubber to prove, make sure that she doesn't go away with him for the weekend.
I love that proving his hypothesis is always like top priority over his fiance.
Right. And so he goes and they do the game, and Shooter McGavin's like, they definitely were cheating. She's like, you're just being a sore loser. She's supposed to be a very intelligent woman. She would have to think something's up. Right. And then he tells her about it. As the president of the school, she would be like legal, especially if they're going to now go sell this. Because he's like, we can go sell this. Like, think about it, sporting good. And she's like, you're thinking small. It's got to be the energy.
Well, and depending on his contract, it may even belong to the university.
Oh, no, he says that it belongs to the university. So I'm on board with that. That's the only thing about this movie that makes sense. But she's like, oh, no, we're definitely going to go with flight in the energy sector. Because he clearly doesn't have any business sense. But at that point, being president of the school, she's got to think about the legal obligation to report the fact that it was used in that sport, because they're going to have to do scientific studies to prove that it's safe and everything. Like, they can't just be like, oh, look, we did this once. Like, they have to go through the scientific process.
Yeah.
And everyone's going to know they cheated. Like, they would be fined out the wazoo for cheating on the basketball game, doing human trials on something.
They'd be banned.
Like, he would be banned from science for life.
Mm-hmm.
So none of this makes sense.
None of it makes sense. You know what makes the least sense to me?
What makes the least sense to you?
The end of the film. So they finally get together. They finally make it to the third wedding.
Fourth wedding.
Is it the fourth wedding?
Yeah, because the one that he missed at the beginning was the third one.
Oh, Jesus. The fourth wedding. Homeboy has had his issue of the sabotaging robot solved. He still is not there in person.
Yeah, they do a video wedding. They do a quarantine COVID wedding.
He uses
Zoom.
the new robot to make a Zoom call to his own wedding.
Yeah, that's not a good look.
Why?
Yeah, she's enabling.
Yeah.
She's an enabler.
It's
not a good look.
It's not a good movie.
No, it's not.
Did this ruin your childhood?
I mean, it's definitely not a good movie. So if this was something I held dear to my heart, then yeah, I would have said absolutely this ruined my childhood. As this is something I only remember seeing twice, maybe a third time, I'm going to say no. Because I honestly don't remember most of this movie. But realistically, this is a bad movie. So I guess I'd have to say yes, because it's just not a good movie from our childhood.
Yeah. I think for me, ooh, this is kind of heavy, actually. Because it's bigger than this movie. It's like... Now in this day and age, and of course he was an icon while he was alive, but Robin Williams is he looms larger than life. He's, especially for our generation, like a fixture. He's iconic.
Yeah.
He's amazing. And for the most part, he can do no wrong. And he is still good in this movie, but at the same time, it was a bad choice. So it kind of makes me see him as a little bit more human. Ooh. And you can see in his face sometimes there are moments where he's just maybe not entirely 100% in the moment. And I think that's healthy for us to see our icons in bad films.
Well, I read, every time we do a movie with Robin Williams, we did The Birdcage just a few weeks ago. We always read about how he has to, stick to the script for, one or two takes, and then he could do his ad-libs. Well, Will Wheaton said that there was enough ad-libs from him that they could have made an entire other movie.
Probably a better one.
But for the most part, apparently they didn't really use any of the ad-libs. So, most of the stuff was the scripted stuff. Mm-hmm. So I'm sure Robin Williams didn't love that. That's probably why he looked a little defeated in parts of the film.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think the only reason this movie did well, I remember the marketing for it. I remember some stuff with McDonald's and Coca-Cola and whatnot.
It was huge marketing.
This movie could have only been made with Robin Williams and maybe Jim Carrey.
Yeah. And I think for me, part of it was probably marketing, but I thought this film was more beloved than it was.
Yeah.
I didn't realize it was this bad. I didn't realize that it was kind of an embarrassment to everyone involved.
How is this a John Hughes film? I don't see John Hughes in this at all.
No, and he was all over it. He didn't just produce it. He co-wrote it.
Yeah. No, he was the sole writer. The other people were credited were dead. They just wrote the things that this was based on. John Hughes and Les own this.
And it wasn't even he died pretty young. He wasn't even 60 when John Hughes
Yeah.
died. But it wasn't even like he had an illness that made him make this choice. Like, he made a whole bunch of other films after this one.
It's pretty bad.
It's just, I guess in certain ways it did ruin my childhood just because, like, my perception of it was so different.
Yeah.
And I kind of thought, like, any Robin Williams film could still be good because he was in it, and that illusion has been shattered for me.
Right. Well, but like we said, he's doing the best that he possibly could with this.
Yeah.
If anybody else did this movie, I think even with Jim Carrey, it wouldn't have been even remotely entertaining. Like, we were still somewhat entertained by it just because we're like, holy, what is going on with this movie?
But you can tell, you can see it in his face. Like, his eyes don't get that sparkle
No.
until he's improvising.
Yeah.
And they took that away from him. So that's like taking the essence away from him.
Yeah. I'm honestly surprised he did this because, like, he didn't have the best relationship with Disney.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. I don't know what's going on. It's not a good movie.
This whole film is such a mystery to me.
If-
I feel like this movie got made to pay a debt somehow. Like, I feel like this movie is just covering some kind of scam. Like, someone needed to get paid for something and they didn't have a legal way to do it, so they made this turd
I
of
feel
a
like
film.
this was probably something where they're going to go, we're going to give John Hughes analysts a big budget, special effects driven movie. And I bet
God, the special effects were so good, though. I feel
fantastic.
like we have to, like, reaffirm that.
Yeah.
They were amazing for 97.
they're still really good.
Oh.
They're better than some of the stuff that I still see coming out every once in a while. But I feel like if this movie was a slam dunk and it was well received, they probably would have done some, like, Honey, I Shrunk the Kids kind of ride attraction at
Yeah.
Disneyland. I feel like they thought this was going to be their next attraction, and this, maybe not a big franchise, but something that they could do something cool. Because this would have been cool to do, like the Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, like one of those,
and they were
amusement park-
also rebooting something that already had a sequel.
Yeah.
So they knew the formula could work.
Right. So it's like, this would have made sense to be one of those things where you go and sit in a theater and the seats rock around and maybe some water gets sprayed on your face. One of those type amusement park rides. I bet that was the plan if this was well received.
Man.
I have no basis for that. I just feel like that's kind of
This
thing
film
could have been
just
it.
reeks of crushed dreams and radioactive isotopes.
Yep.
All right. So, childhood's sufficiently ruined. I guess that kind of wraps this one up for
Yep.
us. Where can we find you on the internet?
I'm basically just the MDXpods account. So MDXpods on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. We're also at MDXpods.com and Patreon.com/MDXpods. And we're on YouTube as well.
Yay. I'm all over the internet at Katrinaosity, although I don't really post that much lately. That's about it. Thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening.